The sound that broke 24-year-old Mia Evans wasn't the faint tinkle of a water droplet landing on expensive leather. It wasn't the collective, sharp intake of breath from the surrounding tables at Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant area. It wasn't even the furious, low growl that emanated from the man in the $1,000 suit. No. The sound that shattered her world was the deafening silence that followed a vacuum of judgment and condemnation that sucked all the air from her lungs. In that moment, she wasn't a person. She was a mistake. A ghost in an apron about to be exorcised by the righteous fury of billionaire Alistair Blackwood. She thought this was the end of her story. She was wrong. It was only the beginning. Stay with us to see how a single drop of water could unleash a tidal wave of events, culminating in a Rolls-Royce Phantom appearing on a rundown street in Queens, with a single unbelievable purpose. The Tuesday shift at Aria was always a special kind of hell. It was the day the titans of industry, fresh from their weekend galas and charity balls, descended upon the restaurant to carve up the world over plates of seared scallops and glasses of vintage Bordeaux. For the waitstaff, it was a high-wire act of flawless service, feigned invisibility, and encyclopedic knowledge of a menu that changed with the chef's whims. Mia Evans knew the steps to this brutal ballet better than anyone. For 2 years, she had perfected the art of the silent pour, the unobtrusive plate placement, the serene smile that betrayed none of the chaos churning within her. Today, that chaos was a maelstrom. Her younger sister Lily had woken with a fever, her already fragile lungs rattling with a cough that sounded like tearing silk. The nebulizer had helped, but the pharmacy had called the copay for her new prescription was higher than expected. It was a sum that to the patrons of Aria was less than the cost of their appetizer. To Mia, it was a mountain. She was already on her 9th hour, a double shift she'd picked up to cover the pharmacy bill. Her feet throbbed, a dull, persistent ache that radiated up her spine. Her head pounded from the low hum of self-important conversations and the pressure of her manager's, Mr. Henderson's, ever-watchful gaze. He moved through the dining room like a shark, smelling for the slightest drop of blood in the water, a misplaced fork, a delayed order, a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. And then at 8:15 p.m., Alistair Blackwood walked in. He didn't just enter a room, he conquered it. The ambient chatter seemed to dip the clinking of cutlery, softening, as if out of respect or fear. He was a man forged in the crucible of Wall Street, known for his ruthless takeovers and a temper as legendary as his fortune. Dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that probably cost more than Mia's car, he radiated an aura of intense predatory energy. His dark hair was impeccably styled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes a piercing cold grey, missed nothing. He was seated at table 7, Mia's station. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood," Mia said, her voice a practiced melody of calm professionalism. She placed the leather-bound menu on the table. He didn't look at her. His attention was fixed on his phone, his thumb swiping angrily at the screen. Water. Still. No ice. "And I want the Wi-Fi password. Now." The words were clipped, each one a shard of ice. "Of course, sir." Mia moved with practiced efficiency, her body a blur of swift economical movements. She retrieved a chilled bottle of Voss and a crystal highball glass. As she returned to the table, her mind was a frantic calculator. 9 hours down, maybe 1 more to go. Overtime pay plus tips. If he's a decent tipper, I can cover Lily's prescription and maybe get ahead on the rent. Just have to be perfect. Don't mess this up. Alistair Blackwood was now on a call, his voice a low, controlled growl that still managed to carry. "Marcus, you listen to me. If that Helios project deal doesn't close by morning, heads will roll. I don't care what you have to do. Make it happen. I have $500 million on the line." Mia approached the table, her movements deliberately slow and careful. She was a ghost, a silent servant. She began to pour the water. The crystal bottle was cool against her tired fingers. The stream was clear, perfect. And then it happened. A busboy, a new kid named Leo Clumsy and terrified, stumbled near her station, jostling her arm, just as she was pulling the bottle away. It was the barest of touches, a fractional nudge, but it was enough. A few drops of water, no more than a teaspoon's worth, arced through the air. Mia's world slowed to a crawl. She watched in horror as they landed. Not on the table, not on the man himself, but on the corner of the gleaming black leather briefcase at his feet. Splash. The sound was infinitesimal, yet it echoed in the cavernous dining room like a gunshot. Alistair Blackwood went rigid. He snapped his phone shut and slowly, deliberately lowered his gaze from Mia's face to the minuscule dark spots on his briefcase. He looked at them as if she had just poured acid on a holy relic. The silence was absolute. Every diner at every nearby table had frozen forks halfway to their mouths. Mr. Henderson was already gliding towards them, his face a mask of apocalyptic dread. "Are you an idiot?" Alistair Blackwood's voice was deceptively soft, a sibilant hiss that was more terrifying than any shout. He finally looked up, and the full, unadulterated fury in his grey eyes struck Mia like a physical blow. I am so sorry, sir. It was an accident. The busboy," she stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Do I look like I care about your excuses?" he said, his voice rising now, laced with contempt. "This is a $5,000 Berluti briefcase. Do you have any idea what's inside it? Contracts worth more than this entire building. And you, with your $5 an hour incompetence, have managed to damage it." The exaggeration was ludicrous, the insult brutally personal. Tears pricked at the corners of Mia's eyes, hot and shameful. "Sir, it's just water. It will dry. I can get a cloth." "Get a cloth?" He scoffed, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. He finally stood up, a towering figure of pure menace. He was speaking not just to her, but to the entire room. This is the problem with the world today. No standards, no accountability. People like you think a simple sorry fixes everything. You stumble through life, leaving a trail of mediocrity and expecting a pat on the back for showing up. Each word was a public flagellation. Mia felt her face burn, the blood draining from it, until she was sure she was as pale as the tablecloth. She could feel the pitying, judgmental stares of the other patrons. She was a spectacle, a lesson. Mr. Henderson arrived, bowing and scraping. "Mr. Blackwood, I am so sorry. Unacceptable. Utterly unacceptable. I can assure you this will be dealt with." He turned his reptilian gaze on Mia. "You're fired. Get your things and get out of my restaurant. Now." There it was. The guillotine had fallen. The mountain she had to climb was now an unclimbable cliff face. Lily's medicine. The rent. It all flashed before her eyes in a dizzying panorama of failure. A flicker of defiance born of pure desperation ignited within her. She looked past her groveling manager directly into Alistair Blackwood's cold eyes. Her voice, when it came, was shaking but clear. It was a few drops of water. For a second, a flicker of something unreadable passed through Blackwood's eyes. Surprise. Annoyance at her audacity. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a stony mask of indifference. He simply sat back down, picked up his phone as if she no longer existed, and said to the room at large, "Can someone who is actually competent please take my order?" Mia didn't wait for another command. She turned on her heel, her body moving on autopilot. She didn't look at the other waiters, at Clara, who was watching with a horrified expression, or at the busboy Leo, who was hiding near the kitchen door, his face ashen. She walked straight to the locker room, her vision blurring. She changed out of her uniform, the crisp black and white, now feeling like a costume of shame. The walk to the subway station was a blur. The vibrant, indifferent lights of New York City seemed to mock her. She was just another casualty in a city that chewed people up and spat them out without a second thought. All because of a man who wouldn't even remember her name, and a few drops of spilled water. As she descended into the grimy depths of the subway, the full weight of her situation crashed down upon her. She wasn't just unemployed, she was destitute. And for the first time in a long time, Mia Evans felt utterly and completely hopeless. The night was a sleepless torment. Every time Mia closed her eyes, she saw Alistair Blackwood's face twisted in contempt. She heard his voice dissecting her worthlessness in front of a jury of her peers and superiors. She would doze for a few minutes, only to be jolted awake by a phantom cough from Lily's room, her heart seizing with a fresh wave of panic. Morning came not with the gentle glow of dawn, but with the harsh grey light of reality filtering through the smudged window of her small Queen's apartment. The building was old, the paint peeling the radiator, clanging a mournful rhythmic beat. It wasn't much, but it was home. Now it felt like a trap, the walls closing in. She found the eviction notice taped to the door when she went to get the mail. It was the preliminary one, the friendly reminder, but it felt like a death sentence. Tucked beside it was a final notice from the utility company. The universe, it seemed, had a flair for dramatic timing. Lily was still asleep, her breathing shallow, but even. Mia looked at her sister's small, peaceful face, a fierce, protective love, warring with the icy tendrils of despair. Lily was the sun in her sky, the reason for every sacrifice, every double shift, every swallowed insult. What am I going to do? The question was a silent scream in her mind. She spent the morning in a zombie-like trance, her laptop open to job search websites. Waitress, hostess, barista. Each click felt like another step down a ladder she had been desperately trying to climb. She had been taking online courses in graphic design, slowly building a portfolio, nurturing a small, fragile dream of a life where her creativity, not her servitude, paid the bills. That dream now seemed like a cruel joke. Around 1100 a.m., a strange sound penetrated her fog of misery. It was a low, powerful purr, the kind of engine noise that didn't belong on her block, where the symphony of the street was usually composed of sputtering delivery trucks, distant sirens, and the occasional backfiring muffler. Curious, she peered out the window. Her breath caught in her throat. Parked directly in front of her dilapidated building, double-parked and utterly indifferent to the honking taxi behind it, was a car. But it wasn't just a car. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, long and black and gleaming with an otherworldly perfection. Its polished chrome grille shimmered even in the dull morning light. It was a spaceship landed in the middle of a junkyard. Her neighbors were already noticing. Mrs. Rodriguez from 3B was leaning out her window, her eyes wide. The kids playing stickball on the sidewalk had stopped their game forgotten as they stared in silent awe. Mia's first thought was that they were in the wrong place. A celebrity, a politician, someone must have gotten lost. But then the back door opened. A man in a crisp, dark chauffeur's uniform stepped out. He was older, with silver hair and a dignified bearing. He scanned the building numbers, his gaze finally settling on her apartment building. He walked to the front door, and a moment later, the buzzer for her apartment 2A shrieked through the quiet misery of her morning. Mia stared at the intercom as if it were a cobra, who no one she knew would be arriving in a Rolls-Royce. Her heart began to pound with a new, unfamiliar rhythm, not just fear, but profound confusion. Hesitantly, she pressed the talk button. "Hello, Miss Amelia Evans." The voice was calm, British, and impossibly polite. "Yes, my name is Arthur. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Alistair Blackwood. He has requested your presence." The name hit her like a physical shock. Alistair Blackwood, the man from the restaurant, the architect of her ruin. Her blood ran cold. Why? What could he possibly want? To serve her with a lawsuit for the damage to his briefcase, to berate her further away from the prying eyes of the public. Every terrible possibility raced through her mind. I don't understand," she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Blackwood would like to speak with you at his office. He has asked me to assure you that you are not in any trouble. In fact, he wishes to apologize." Apologize. The word seemed alien. A man like Alistair Blackwood didn't apologize. He conquered. He destroyed. He moved on. The idea was so preposterous that it broke through her fear. This had to be a trick, a cruel, elaborate prank. "I'm not interested," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. There was a pause on the other end. Miss Evans Arthur said, his tone patient and kind. "He is also prepared to offer you compensation for your abrupt dismissal. He is aware that your manager acted rashly at his behest." Compensation. The word hung in the air, shimmering with possibility. It was a lifeline, a way out of the suffocating darkness. Could she afford to say no? Could she afford to believe him? She thought of Lily. She thought of the eviction notice. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Give me 10 minutes," she said, her resolve crumbling under the weight of her desperation. She threw on the nicest clothes she owned, a simple pair of black slacks and a clean white blouse. She ran a brush through her hair and splashed cold water on her face, trying to erase the signs of her sleepless night. She scribbled a quick note for Lily, telling her she'd gone out for a job interview and would be back soon, her hands shaking as she wrote the lie. Walking out of her building and towards the magnificent car felt like stepping into another dimension. The chauffeur, Arthur, held the door open for her. The interior was a cocoon of soft cream leather and polished burr walnut, smelling faintly of wood polish and wealth. It was silent, the chaos of her street vanishing the moment the heavy door closed with a satisfying thump. As the Rolls-Royce pulled away from the curb, gliding through the streets with serene grace, Mia felt a profound sense of whiplash. 24 hours ago, she had been serving a billionaire. Now she was riding in his car, heading towards an unknown fate, her entire future hanging on the whims of a man who had tried to destroy her over a few drops of water. The absurdity of it all was dizzying. This wasn't her life. This was something out of a movie, a bizarre, high-stakes drama she had stumbled into by accident, and she had no idea what her role was supposed to be. The journey from Queens to Manhattan was a silent study in contrasts. Outside the tinted windows, Mia's world of brick tenements, bodegas, and chain-link fences gradually gave way to the gleaming steel and glass canyons of Midtown. The Rolls-Royce moved through traffic like a shark parting a school of fish, an island of serene power in a sea of urban chaos. Arthur drove with effortless concentration, his hands steady on the wheel. He didn't speak, but his silence was comfortable, respectful. It was a stark contrast to the violent, judgmental silence she had endured at the restaurant. Their destination was Blackwood Tower, a name Mia had seen in the business section of newspapers, but had never really registered. Seeing it in person was another matter entirely. The skyscraper was a monument to power, a shard of obsidian and smoked glass that pierced the sky, seeming to sneer at the lesser buildings around it. Arthur escorted her from the underground garage to a private elevator. There were no buttons. He simply pressed his thumb to a small, discreet panel, and the elevator began its silent, impossibly fast ascent. Her ears popped. Mr. Blackwood's office is on the top floor. The penthouse, Arthur explained, his voice calm. He can be an intense man, Miss Evans. But his contrition is genuine. I would not have driven you here if it were not. Mia could only nod, her throat suddenly dry. The words of a kind driver did little to quell the frantic beating of her heart. The elevator doors opened directly into the office. And it wasn't an office. It was a kingdom. The space was immense, occupying the entire floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking 360-degree view of New York City. The city spread out below them like a living map. The furniture was minimalist and modern, a massive black desk that looked like it was carved from a single piece of stone, sleek leather chairs, and abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. And there, standing by the window with his back to her, was Alistair Blackwood. He was looking out over his domain, a titan in his natural habitat. He turned as the elevator doors chimed. He was dressed more casually today, in dark trousers and a grey cashmere sweater, but he looked no less intimidating. The cold, assessing look in his eyes was the same. For a long moment, he just looked at her, and Mia had to fight the urge to shrink under his gaze. "Miss Evans," he said. His voice was level without the venom of the previous night, but also without any warmth. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." He gestured to one of the chairs opposite his desk. Mia sat on the edge of the seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her mind was a blank slate of apprehension. He walked around his desk and sat down, leaning back in his chair. He steepled his fingers, his grey eyes fixed on her. "I imagine you are wondering why you are here." "The thought had crossed my mind," Mia said, surprised at the steadiness of her own voice. A flicker of something, perhaps respect, passed through his eyes. "Last night I was under an immense amount of pressure. A significant business deal was on the verge of collapsing due to sabotage from a competitor. I was not myself. My behavior was inexcusable." The words sounded rehearsed, as if he were a man unaccustomed to admitting fault. "You were cruel," Mia stated the word, leaving her lips before she could stop it. "It was a risk, but she wouldn't let him minimize what he'd done. He didn't flinch. He simply nodded. Yes, I was. I allowed my professional frustrations to spill over onto you, who were merely doing your job. There is no excuse for what I said or how I treated you, and I am sorry. The apology, when it finally came, was direct. It still felt surreal. It wasn't just your words, Mia pressed, feeling a strange surge of courage. You cost me my job. I am aware, he said. Which brings me to the point. I have already contacted your former manager, Mr. Henderson. I have informed him that his decision to fire you was a result of my own unacceptable behavior, and that if he did not reinstate you with a formal apology, I would make it my personal mission to ensure every one of my business associates and acquaintances never sets foot in Aria again. Mia stared at him, stunned. He saw reason, Alistair continued with a slight mirthless smile. Your job is waiting for you should you want it. Furthermore, I am prepared to write you a check for $50,000 as compensation for the emotional distress and the professional damages I caused. $50,000. The number was so vast, so life-altering, it didn't seem real. It would solve everything. Lily's medical bills, the rent, the utilities, food for the next year. It was a magic wand, waved by the very man who had cursed her. She could take the money, go back to her old life, and pretend this bizarre chapter had never happened. But something held her back. Was it pride? Or was it a deep-seated feeling that this was too simple, too clean? A way for him to assuage his guilt with a bank transfer, to wipe the slate clean and forget the face of the waitress he had humiliated. Why she asked, her voice quiet. Why go to all this trouble? You could have just forgotten about me. I'm nobody. Arthur, my driver has been with me for 15 years. He is a man of quiet integrity. On the drive home last night, he told me he had never been more ashamed to work for me. That a man's character is not measured by how he treats his equals, but his supposed inferiors. Alistair looked away for a moment towards the window. It was a sobering assessment. He paused, then continued. I didn't sleep last night. Your face, your reaction, it stuck with me. So I had my security team find you. It wasn't difficult. He gestured vaguely as if accessing the personal information of a private citizen was as simple as ordering a coffee. I wanted to understand who it was I had so casually dismissed. He slid a thin file across the polished desk. Mia's name was on the tab. Her heart hammered. He had investigated her. Amelia Evans, 24 years old, valedictorian, Northgate High School, full scholarship to NYU, which you had to turn down when your parents passed away, and you became the legal guardian of your younger sister Lily, who has a chronic respiratory condition. You've been working 2 jobs to support her while taking online courses in graphic design. Your professors describe your work as exceptionally promising. He knew everything. The knowledge that this powerful, intimidating man had dissected her life, her struggles, her tragedies, left her feeling exposed and violated. You had no right, she whispered, her voice trembling with a new emotion, anger. No, I did not, he conceded. But I did. And in doing so, I discovered something. This isn't just about an apology, Miss Evans. That's why I asked Arthur to bring you here in person. He turned his large monitor towards her. On the screen was the portfolio website she had painstakingly built, a collection of her best design projects from her online classes. It was her secret garden, the place where her dreams lived. His finger pointed to a specific project. It was a logo concept she had created for a fictional green energy company she had named Solstice. The logo was a stylized S that cleverly incorporated the image of a rising sun and a leaf. It was her favorite piece, the one she felt truly proud of. This, he said, his voice now charged with a different kind of energy. A professional energy. This is brilliant. Mia blinked, confused. It's just a class project. No, he said, leaning forward. It's the solution to a multi-million-dollar problem I've been having. I'm launching a new subsidiary of Blackwood Industries, a clean energy venture. Our marketing team, a group of people I pay an obscene amount of money, has been working for 6 months on the branding. They've produced nothing but corporate, soulless garbage. He gestured to her logo on the screen. This has vision. It's clean, memorable, and it tells a story. It's exactly what I've been looking for. The pieces of the puzzle suddenly sammed together in Mia's mind, forming a picture she could never have imagined. This wasn't about guilt. It wasn't about charity. Or at least it wasn't just about that. So the $50,000, she began, is still yours for what I did, he said firmly. Consider it an apology. But I am now making you a separate proposal. A business proposal. He closed the file on her life and looked at her as an equal for the first time. I don't want you to be a waitress at Aria Miss Evans. I want you to work for me. I want you to sell me the rights to this logo, and I want to offer you a 3-month freelance contract to oversee the development of the entire brand identity for my new company. The compensation for that contract will be $200,000. Mia's entire world tilted on its axis. $200,000. The number was astronomical beyond the realm of her wildest dreams. It was escape. It was security. It was the best medical care for Lily. It was a future. But it came from him, the man who just hours before had seen her as less than human. Could she work for him? Could she trust him? She looked from his intense, expectant face to the logo on the screen. Her dream suddenly made real. She took a deep breath, the air in the penthouse office tasting of power and impossible choices. Her life had been irrevocably fractured last night. Now he was offering to piece it back together, not as it was, but as something new and terrifying and extraordinary. The silence in the penthouse office stretched thick with unspoken questions. $200,000. The number echoed in Mia's mind, a siren song of salvation. It was enough to change not just her life, but Lily's. It was the difference between scraping by and truly living, between constant fear and the freedom to breathe. But it was a deal with the devil who had cast her into hell just the night before. She looked at Alistair Blackwood, really looked at him. The predatory intensity was still there, but now it was focused on her not as a nuisance, but as an asset. He saw her talent, her creation, and he wanted it. This wasn't charity. It was an acquisition, and that strangely gave her power. No, she said. Alistair's eyebrows shot up. It was clear he was not a man who heard that word often. No. The $50,000 for your behavior. Mia said, her voice gaining strength with every word. I accept that. Because you're right, it was unacceptable and it caused me real harm. But the contract for my design work is a separate matter. It's business, and my work is worth more than that. She didn't know where the audacity came from. Perhaps it was the residual anger from the night before. Perhaps it was the dawning realization that for the first time she was holding a card he wanted. The logo and a 3-month exclusive contract for the full brand identity development. She continued, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. My price is $300,000, and I want a dedicated workspace here in this building with full access to your marketing team and project managers. I will not be treated as some girl you took pity on. I will be a professional contractor, and I expect to be treated with the same respect as any of your other department heads. She held her breath, expecting him to laugh, to call her bluff, to throw her out. Instead, Alistair Blackwood leaned back in his chair, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It transformed him. The harsh lines of his face softened, and for the first time, Mia saw a glimpse of the man behind the ruthless tycoon. He looked intrigued, impressed, even amused. Arthur was right about you, he said, almost to himself. He extended a hand across the vast expanse of his desk. Miss Evans, you have a deal. $300,000. Your own office on the 48th floor. Welcome to Blackwood Industries. Mia took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and sent an unexpected jolt through her. It was a handshake that sealed not just a business transaction, but the beginning of a chapter so wildly different from anything she could have imagined. The next 2 weeks were a blur of radical transformation. True to his word, Alistair had a spacious modern office prepared for her. It had one of the floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a view that made her old apartment feel like it was on a different planet. He provided her with a state-of-the-art computer design software and a corporate expense account. The first check, the $50,000, cleared in her bank account the next day. The sheer relief was a physical sensation, like a heavy cloak being lifted from her shoulders. She paid the rent, the utilities, and walked into the pharmacy, placing the full amount for Lily's next 6 months of medication on the counter, without even checking the price. For the first time in years, the knot of financial anxiety in her stomach began to loosen. Life inside Blackwood Tower was another matter. It was a culture shock of the highest order. The employees were sleek, ambitious, and moved with a sense of purpose that bordered on aggression. In her simple blouses and slacks, Mia felt like a sparrow that had wandered into an aviary of eagles. Whispers followed her down the hallways. Everyone knew the story, or at least a version of it. They knew she had come from nowhere, that the CEO himself had plucked her from obscurity. Some viewed her with curiosity, others with suspicion. The marketing department, in particular, treated her with a thinly veiled hostility. She was the amateur who had shown them up, the waitress who had succeeded where they had failed. Their leader, a sharp woman named Eleanor Vance, made her disdain clear through polite cutting remarks and a refusal to make eye contact. Mia's refuge became her work. She poured all her energy, her talent, and her frustration into the Solstice project. She wasn't just designing a brand. She was building a fortress, proving to herself and everyone else that she belonged there, that she had earned her place through merit, not pity. Her interactions with Alistair were frequent and intense. He was a demanding client, his attention to detail absolute. They would spend hours in her new office debating shades of green, the kerning of a font, the emotional impact of a particular photograph for the website. He would challenge her, push her question, her choices. Why this blue? It feels too cold, he'd say, pointing at a mock-up. It's not cold, it's crisp. She'd counter, pulling up her research. It evokes clarity technology, the sky on a clear winter day. It's about efficiency, not just fuzzy green feelings. That's what sets Solstice apart, right? The tech. During these sessions, the power dynamics between them began to shift and blur. They were no longer Billionaire and Waitress. They were two sharp minds, focused on a common goal. He began to respect her intellect and her unwavering artistic vision. She in turn began to see past the ruthless exterior to the brilliant, passionate innovator beneath. She saw the immense pressure he was under, the weight of the thousands of jobs that depended on his decisions. There were moments, too, of unexpected connection. One evening, working late, he found her staring out the window, a sad, distant look on her face. $100 million view. "And you look like you just lost your last dollar," he commented, his voice softer than usual. "I was just thinking about my sister," Mia admitted. "She'd love this. She's always wanted to fly. From up here, it feels like you can." He didn't offer platitudes. He just stood beside her, looking out at the glittering carpet of city lights. "Tell me about her." And so she did. She told him about Lily's spirit, her humor, her resilience in the face of her illness. She spoke of their parents, of the life they had lost, and the small world they had built together. He listened, truly listened, and in that shared moment of quiet vulnerability, something shifted between them. The space was no longer just professional. He began to change, too. The staff at Blackwood Industries noticed it. The infamous temper seemed to have subsided. He was seen smiling occasionally. Arthur, the driver, would catch his eye and give a small, knowing nod. One Friday, Alistair insisted on driving her home himself, swapping the back seat of the Rolls-Royce for the driver's seat of a sleek Aston Martin. The sight of the supercar pulling up to her Queen's apartment building was even more jarring than the Rolls. "I have a proposition for you, Mia," he said, turning off the engine. His use of her first name felt significant. "My company is sponsoring a wing at the New York Children's Hospital. They have the best pediatric pulmonary specialists in the country. I've spoken to the Chief of Staff. He's agreed to take Lily on as a patient." Mia was speechless. This was more than money, more than a job. This was a lifeline for the person she loved most in the world. Tears welled in her eyes, tears not of shame or sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude. "Why," she whispered, "why are you doing all this?" Alistair looked at her, his grey eyes searching her face. "Because," he said slowly, "character is not measured by how you treat your equals. It's measured by how you treat your supposed inferiors. And you, Mia, were never my inferior. It just took me a catastrophic loss of temper to see it." In the close confines of the car, with the city lights painting patterns on their faces, the air grew thick with an unspoken emotion. It was more than gratitude, more than respect. It was a fragile, terrifying, and undeniably powerful connection. The Waitress and the Billionaire were gone. In their place were just Mia and Alistair, and their story was far from over. The Solstice Project was a triumph. Mia's vision, backed by Alistair's resources, came to life with breathtaking speed. The brand identity she created was universally praised by market analysts and the media. The logo she had sketched in her lonely apartment became a symbol of innovation splashed across billboards and digital ads. Mia Evans, the former Waitress, was now a rising star in the design world. Her relationship with Alistair deepened in tandem with their professional success. Their late-night work sessions evolved into dinners. Their arguments over branding strategy softened into conversations about their pasts, their fears, their dreams. He showed her his world of charity galas and exclusive clubs, and she, in turn, grounded him, reminding him of the world outside his glass tower. She took him for pizza in her neighborhood, and he watched, fascinated, as she interacted with the people there. With an easy warmth, he had never known. Lily was thriving under the care of the new specialists. The color had returned to her cheeks, her laughter echoing through the new, larger apartment Mia had rented in a safer neighborhood. For the first time, Mia felt the solid ground of stability beneath her feet. She was happy. She was in love. But in every paradise a serpent waits. The serpent's name was Marcus Thorne, the competitor whose sabotage had been the catalyst for Alistair's rage on that fateful night at Aria. Alistair had successfully closed the Helios project deal, outmaneuvering Thorne and costing his rival company, Thorne Dynamics, a fortune. Thorne was a man who did not forgive or forget. He had been watching Alistair's recent success, his company's soaring stock price, and the media buzz around the Solstice launch, and he had noticed the one new inexplicable variable in the equation, Mia Evans. To Thorne, Mia was not a talented designer. She was a weakness, a vulnerability in Alistair's armor, and he decided to strike at the heart of their new fragile happiness. The attack was insidious, brilliant in its cruelty. It began with an anonymous email sent to the board of Blackwood Industries. The email contained documents, design mock-ups, marketing timelines, and budget projections for Solstice's second phase rollout. It was highly confidential information. The email claimed that Alistair Blackwood's new protégé, the Waitress from Queens, was selling corporate secrets. As proof, it included bank records showing a series of large, untraceable cash deposits into an offshore account opened in Mia's name. The evidence was a masterful fabrication. Thorne's team of hackers had breached the Blackwood servers to steal the documents and had expertly faked the financial trail. To the board, it looked damning. Alistair was summoned to an emergency meeting. He was shown the evidence, the cold, hard facts of Mia's betrayal. The board members, who had always been wary of Mia's sudden ascent, looked at him with a mixture of pity and "I told you so." When Alistair finally found Mia, she was in her office, sketching ideas for a new campaign. The joy and creativity drained from her face the moment she saw his expression. It was a look she had not seen since that night at Aria, a mask of cold, controlled fury. "What is this?" he said, his voice dangerously low as he tossed a printed copy of the fabricated bank statement onto her desk. "Did you think I was a fool? Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Mia stared at the document, her name printed at the top. The numbers, the transactions, it was all nonsense, but it looked terrifyingly real. "Alistair, I don't know what this is. I've never seen this before in my life. This isn't mine, isn't it?" He countered, his voice laced with the old familiar venom of betrayal. "It seems you've done very well for yourself. A girl from Queens with an offshore account. Was this the plan all along? Get close to me, gain my trust, and then sell me out to the highest bidder." The accusation was so monstrous, so far from the truth that it knocked the air from her lungs. This wasn't the man she had come to love, the man who had stood by her side at the hospital, the man who had shared his secrets with her. This was the Alistair Blackwood from the restaurant, the ruthless tycoon who trusted no one and saw conspiracies in every shadow. All his old demons had come rushing back. "How can you even ask me that?" She whispered, tears streaming down her face. "After everything, how can you believe this?" "The board believes it." He shot back. "The evidence is compelling. Right now, you are the single greatest liability to my company." Her heart shattered. It wasn't just the accusation. It was the fact that he believed it. He had chosen the word of a faceless email over her. The foundation of trust they had so carefully built had crumbled into dust. "If you believe this," she said, her voice breaking, "then there's nothing more for me to say." She stood up, her body trembling. "I guess I'm fired. Again." She walked out of the office, leaving him standing there amidst the ruins of what they had built. She didn't go to her new apartment. She went to her old one, the one she had kept for Lily's sake, a reminder of where they came from. She collapsed onto the bed in the empty room, the silence a crushing weight. She had flown so high only to have her wings torn away. The fairy tale was over. For 2 days she heard nothing. She shut off her phone, unable to bear the thought of seeing his name. She told Lily she was working on a special project from home. The lie tasted like ash. Her old friend from Aria Clara came to visit, bringing groceries and offering a shoulder to cry on. "He's a monster," Mia Clara said, her voice fierce with loyalty. "Rich men are all the same. They build you up just so they can enjoy tearing you down." But even as she cried, a small, defiant part of Mia's mind refused to give up. This wasn't right. She was being framed. And as her grief began to subside, it was replaced by a cold, clear anger. She would not be a victim. She would fight back. She turned her phone back on. There were dozens of missed calls from Alistair and a single cryptic text from Arthur. Things are not always as they seem. The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. Have faith. Fueled by a new resolve, Mia began to think. She went over the fabricated documents again and again in her mind. The bank statement, the logo designs. There had to be a mistake, a flaw in the forgery. She thought back to the designs that were leaked. They were for the second phase rollout. She remembered presenting them to Alistair in his office just last week. And then it hit her. A single tiny detail. One of the leaked logo variations included a specific shade of blue. It was the very shade he had questioned the one he called too cold. She had argued for it, but he had ultimately vetoed it, asking her to use a slightly warmer tone. The final approved designs, which were saved on the secure server, had the new blue. But the leaked designs, the ones supposedly stolen by her, still had the old, rejected blue. The only copy of that specific file existed on her personal work laptop, on a draft file she had never even uploaded. There was no way a hacker stealing from the Blackwood server could have gotten that specific rejected version. The only way for them to have it was if they had hacked her personal computer. Her fingers flew across her keyboard. She wasn't just a designer. She had learned a thing or two about the digital world. She ran a deep security scan on her laptop. And there it was, a piece of spyware cleverly hidden. It had been installed 3 weeks ago. It tracked her keystrokes, copied her files, and sent them to an encrypted IP address. She traced the IP address. It was routed through a dozen different countries, a classic smokescreen. But with the help of some software her professor had recommended, she peeled back the layers. The signal's origin was a server registered to a shell corporation, a corporation owned by Thorn Dynamics. She had him. She had the proof. At that exact moment, a knock came at her door. Her heart leaped into her throat. She opened it to find Alistair standing there. He looked exhausted, his eyes haunted. He had a file in his hand. "Mia, He began, his voice hoarse. "I know who did it," she said, cutting him off. Her voice ringing with the clarity of truth. It was Marcus Thorne. He hacked my personal laptop, not the company server. And he made a mistake. Alistair looked at her, and for the first time since the accusation, the icy mask on his face cracked. A slow, weary smile touched his lips. He opened the file he was holding. Inside was a detailed report from his own cybersecurity team and a printout of an email. "I know," he said, softly. "It took my team 48 hours, but they found the same thing. The blue. The rejected blue was the key." He held up the email. "This is Thorne's confession." Or close enough. He explained everything. The confrontation in her office, the cruel words, it had been an act. A terrible, necessary act. He knew from the moment he saw the evidence that it was too perfect. It felt like Thorne. But the board was in a panic, ready to oust her and him along with her. He couldn't risk tipping Thorne off that he was suspicious. He had to play the part to make Thorne believe his plan had worked. He had to cut Mia out to protect her, even if it meant breaking her heart and his own. I had to let him think he'd won. "Alistair," said his voice, thick with regret. "I put my best people on it, and I baited him. I sent a fake email from my account to a board member complaining about the financial hole you'd left and discussing our vulnerable new assets. I knew Thorne was monitoring our internal communications. He took the bait. He tried to initiate a hostile takeover using the chaos he'd created as leverage. And in his haste, he exposed his entire network." Mia stared at him, the entire narrative of the past few days, rewriting itself in her mind. The pain, the betrayal, it had all been a strategy. A ruthless, high-stakes chess game where she had been the queen he had to sacrifice to win the war. "You let me believe," she whispered, the hurt still raw. "It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do," he said, stepping closer, his grey eyes pleading with her. "Mia, seeing the look on your face when I accused you, it almost killed me. But it was the only way to destroy him for good. Can you ever forgive me?" Tears welled in her eyes again. But this time, they were not tears of sorrow. They were a complex cocktail of relief, lingering pain, and a deep, overwhelming love for this complicated, brilliant, and infuriating man. He had played the villain to save her. She didn't answer with words. She closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. He held her tightly, as if he was afraid she might disappear. The fairy tale hadn't ended. It had just passed through the darkest part of the forest. And as they stood there in the doorway of her old life, they both knew they had emerged into the light, stronger and more certain than ever before. The serpent was defeated, the paradise reclaimed. So the story of Mia Evans and Alistair Blackwood wasn't just a Cinderella story. It wasn't about a poor girl being saved by a rich man. It was a story about seeing the human being behind the job title. It was about how a moment of cruelty, born from stress and pride, could lead to an unexpected journey of redemption, respect, and ultimately, love. Alistair didn't just give Mia a job. She gave him back a piece of his own humanity. And together they proved that a true partnership isn't built on power or money, but on trusting each other even when the world is trying to tear you apart. They faced down betrayal and came out the other side, not just as lovers, but as equals, a testament to the fact that sometimes our greatest mistakes can lead to our most profound triumphs. What do you think is the biggest lesson from this story? Was Alistair right to test Mia in such a cruel way? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if their incredible journey from a restaurant disaster to a powerful partnership moved you, please give this video a huge thumbs up. Share it with someone who loves a great story. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another real-life drama. Thank you for watching.